Hey, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. I am Dennis, and we have quite a Black Friday treat for you all. You've celebrated with the family on Thanksgiving, the camaraderie, the togetherness, the enjoyment of hobbies, and now it's Black Friday, the bleak black commercial side of everything that we embrace as Americans. And we're going to celebrate that by doing our favorite thing to do as Americans, and that is rank things. So today we are going to go through. We have 31 brands. That is not all the brands, obviously. There has to be some limit. There has to be some sanity that is applied at some stage. So there is no Ulysse Nardon today. There is no Parmigiani Fluier. There is no Crador. I made sacrifices to get it down to 31. And I probably should have sacrificed some more. But we've had one person. We were looking at a panel of 5, and now we're down to a panel of 3 due to illnesses and other just, hey, it's the holidays, so we understand. So very much appreciate those that have been able to join us. And so I'll let you guys do introductions and find out what you're wearing on your wrist. And then I'll kind of explain the rules real quick. It's going to be super duper basic. And then we're just going to go at it. And it should be a lot of fun. So Patrick, welcome.
Well, it's simple enough. I'm Patrick, also known as @PocketWatchTime, and I'm at Grandma's house. So if at any point during today's episode you hear me do a quick grab for the mic, there's like 12 people running around this place, and I have no control over 11 of them. But today on the wrist, I'm wearing a funky Seiko. So this is a weird, kind of wants to be like a Vacheron Historique where it's a little bit lopsided and it's got a weird angle to it. But the idea is similar to that. It's a driver's watch, and you bring it up to the face and you can tell the time a little bit easier. But it's the designer of the Ripley. So it's I got butchered in the comments for not saying his name very well, but it's like Gaigiero. But an Italian name from a non-Italian me. So, but fun little watch. And
I'll figure out these buttons. Okay. Yeah, no, the bracelet actually kind of reminded me of the Streamliner from Moser. That was my first reaction. I'm getting pings from David out of Canada. His laptop's having issues. So if he makes it, he makes it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Tony, introduction. Go ahead and zoom in on you so we can see what you've got. Are you grabbing a watch?
I'm not grabbing a watch. The watch is already on. It's just okay. My bull of a hack. It's just the most simplest of simple watches. I was just moving stuff out of the shot that I didn't think needed to be in the shot because I started the camera up late and didn't have a good chance to patrol my stuff. But I'm Tony. I co-host the Eclectic Gamers podcast, and I like watches. And I have a reputation for not liking certain brands.
Well, you'll get to flex that. Hey, that's part of the reason why Patrick was the, after you, Tony, was the second invite that popped in my head. Cause I'm like, there's someone who doesn't have a problem saying when he doesn't like something, which hobbyists often appreciate. And anyway, I'm Dennis, obviously. So I already introduced the channel. Today I'm wearing, speaking of Moser Pioneer Center Seconds, because I can never wear this to work because the sapphire is too big to fit under my dress shirts. So, but I am in t-shirt today because I didn't work. So here are and if David gets in, we'll do that. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined in live. The thumbnail that you all saw is not going to be the thumbnail that is actually going to happen, because one of the things we're going to do with this approach is the audience is going to get to vote. So I'm never going to lead off because I got to make all these polls live to let you all vote through YouTube. And that means we're going to have 4 tiers. And speaking of that, David had asked, why is Christopher Ward in the worst category? And that's from the thumbnail. And the answer, David, is clickbait. That is why it's in the last tier. We don't know that it'll be in the last tier in real life, but this is the pretend world in the world of the thumbnail. In the world of the thumbnail, it is to bait people into clicking on it, because I know a lot of people buy those watches. So anyway, let me go ahead and show you all. This is pretty much everyone's familiar with TierMaker, or if you don't know what TierMaker is, that's what this look is. It's a site. It's tiermaker.com. You can go there. There are all sorts of templates, including for watches that already exist. And I took one of those and I made some modifications. You'll see some of these things like Tissot are super large, and that's because they weren't in the version I pulled from. So I just quickly uploaded a few logos, and we ended up with 31. So there are going to be 4 categories: great, good, okay, and poor. And we're basically going to grade these on 3 Ps. So I want you to think about the prestige of the brand. I want you to think about the performance related things. So that would be complications. That would be the robustness of the, you could take it a lot of different ways when we talk about performance. And the third item would be popularity. So prestige, of course, is sort of the respectfulness of the brand, but some watch types are very, very popular. So popularity, prestige, and performance, which is really broadly interpreted. Now, those don't have to be equal thirds. You can balance this however you want, but that's just the framework I'm giving everyone to kind of think beyond just what maybe you would buy or what you own, but rather just, be broad, I don't know. You're going to do whatever you want to do. So what we'll do is we'll go through a brand. Each of us will speak on it. Ideally, spend maybe a minute just sort of, giving your thoughts overall, maybe around those 3 Ps as a framework. Meanwhile, there will be a poll for all the people watching live. What I'm going to do is I have my trusty TI-85 calculator from the 90s. Wow. I'm going to add up our, like if it's we do one and Patrick's a good, I'm a good, and Tony's an okay, and the audience, the item that wins is a poor, it'll be a 3 + 3 + 2 + 1 divided by 4, rounding rules apply, and then we'll group it. So there's actually a 4th panelist, and that's the live audience. So that's how we're going to do it. Pretty straightforward, clear as mud. It'll make sense as we go along. I test drove this with a Rolex last weekend, and it worked out okay. So
yeah, it worked pretty good, I thought.
So I'll go ahead and launch the first poll. And unfortunately for Flight Simulator 2020, who wants no Swiss junk, we are starting with Swiss. Now, whether it's junk or not will be up to all of you and all of us here on the panel, and that is Blancpain. So, Patrick, go ahead and kick us off. The poll is live because I actually was able to pre-type this one. What are your thoughts on Blancpain, and where would you end up grouping it based off of that?
Well, the bad news for me is my near vision is crap, and I'm not putting my glasses on, so I can't actually read what the titles are, but I'm just going to call them 1, 2, 3, and 4. And
yes. Good is the best category is 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's fine. You can just say the number. I actually have the numbers in parentheses.
Okay, so I have a love-hate relationship with Blancpain. So the quick and simple is I think they're a really good brand, and I think they make a really good movement, probably better than Rolex movement. But they're pricey and they're too big. And so I have to kind of lose respect for them because they won't listen to their clients and give us what we want, which is a 40 millimeter watch, except for special editions. They're all 45. So I mean, it's still a good watch, though. So I'm going to have to give it a 3 out of 4.
Okay. So Patrick is a 3. Tony, what are your thoughts? Blancpain.
I'm in a pretty similar vein, except for I have no problems with the size on the Blancpain. I do think, for me, they are what I would call the quintessential middle tier. If this was a 5 tier panel, I would have put them exactly in the middle. It's not. I'm actually going to put them at 2 because I think they're just a little below. Personally, nothing in their stable really jumps out at me as something that I just have to have. They never really fall into my short list of things I want, while still acknowledging that they have nice watches and they've got great movements and there's a lot of good stuff. They just don't fall into my personal taste. So I'm going to put them at a 2.
Okay. Oh, and so Tony, I don't know if you can adjust your gain up a little bit. You were cutting out a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Times there. In terms of me, yeah, I'm very similar to you, Tony. The difference, Blancpain, you all have made really good points. Here's the thing about Blancpain. So prestige wise, I guess they're kind of if you know, like luxury dive watch. It's like the pinnacle on the dive side. Like most people would say specification wise and material wise, it's better than a Submariner, which is, generally kind of you don't see a lot of dive watches up past that point, and Blancpain's basically all there is. That comes to my mind, at least. The problem is, outside of the 50 fathoms, no one knows anything about Blancpain. You'll have an occasional person act like they know what the Villeray is, but no one really does, including myself, and I've looked at them. So, and while I've been interested in a Blancpain, the regular 50 fathoms is way too big for me, so I'd have to look at a Bathyscaphe, and half of those are too big for me too. So, but the problem is, I think it's kind of there on the prestige. It's not a popular brand. I think a lot of people were quasi-shocked that they did the collaboration with Swatch with a Blancpain as the second watch instead of doing a second Omega. And I throw me in that camp. My assumption is Swatch Group hoped that maybe that would make Blancpain more popular. They take a dive, pun somewhat intended, on the secondhand market, even the 50 fathoms, for a reason. The demand just isn't there. And I can't really speak too much to the robustness of it. So overall, even though I actually wouldn't mind getting a Bathyscaphe, I'm going to give it a 2. I'm going to put it at okay as my ranking. So now we turn to the audience. So let me end the poll and find out what they voted on. And according to them, it was a tie between okay and good, both at 37% were the highest level. So I'll put that at a 2.5 because we'll be fair with them. They get to actually do decimals. We don't, because we're broken people. So take all that, divide it by 4. That's a 2.375, which of course rounds down to a 2. So Blancpain is an okay brand. So makes sense. This is how we're going to proceed. So we'll go ahead. The next one, because I know Patrick probably can't see it, is we'll do Breguet. So I'll get the poll started. And Patrick, if you want to give your thoughts on Breguet.
My idea of Breguet is a simple one. They just bore the hell out of me. I mean, they're beautiful watches. They're well made. They've definitely got the history, but I'm just not a dress piece guy, and they don't make anything that makes me say, I want to own it. I can admire it and I can say, oh, that's pretty, but for me, they lose it there, but I'm going to kick me out of the way and say, they're a great brand that makes good, if not great watches. They're not the cream of the crop, so they're a 3.
Okay, so another 3. Tony, your thoughts?
I think Breguets are works of art. They're amazing. They're beautiful. I love the fact that of all of the watches in this entire list, that only Breguet is name dropped in some of my favorite novels of all time, which is hilarious. But Breguet is name dropped in like the Patrick O'Brien Master and Commander novels as a watch that is used regularly by naval officers. And I find that hilarious. And that doesn't affect my voting. I just find it hilarious. But I put them as a 4, a great. They're just so beautiful. They have such a history. They have such a every time I see a Breguet, I just would love to own one. And I don't typically do dress watches, but their stuff is so beautiful. I just wanted to put it up on a wall because for me, they are just art. Okay.
So Tony's at a great, a 4. Patrick's at a 3, a good. I fall between you two. And this is a brand where, and I like dress watches, so let me qualify that. But trying to stick with the frame that I constructed, like there's so much about what they do on the dial that I think is impressive. The rose turning for the that they do for a lot of the etching. Their enamel work's very impressive as well. If you're more into that, I am not, but it's an option. But they're so fuddy-duddy in so many of their designs. I find the traditional, and I get it because it looks like the pocket watch, but I find that entire line bad. Visually, it's hard to read. They take up very little time, so I have to rule that one out. The current direction they went with the Marine, I loved the old Marines. The new Marines with the filled in numerals look like cheap enamel pins that you would order to put on your backpack. Can't stand the current Marine line. The Classique is great. The Classique line is wonderful, and that's where I would turn at this point. I think that their flight themed watches are okay. Very, very prestigious brand, very prestigious, but not popular. And almost every watch they sell shows that on the secondhand market. And a lot of it's just they don't seem to innovate. It just seems to be the same look. And I think they feel like they can't change too much from what Breguet did in the past, but it's not the era of Louis XIV anymore. I wish they would branch out a little bit more beyond their Type 20 watches. So I'm actually going to put them at good, because what they do very, very well. And I would love to own a Breguet as a dress watch, but I can't put them at great. They have too many misses going on in my opinion. So I'm going to be with Patrick on this one and give them a 3. And so I will end the poll to see where the people think that they belong. And the people say they're 2, 50%. Okay. And I'm not too shocked given how few people I know of own Breguets. So that's a 3, 4, 3, 2 divided by the 4 means it comes right out at an even 3, a good. So Patrick and I, the people are with us because the people counteracted Tony's vote. So that's how it functioned. All right, you guys have the feel for it, and because I have to type the poll, let me do it this way, Patrick. Pick a brand, and if you can't read them, I'll be more than happy to tell. I tried to zoom in a little bit more so you could see a little better, but most of the big brands that you would want are in here, maybe, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the one everyone wants our opinion for would have to be Rolex. So let's go Rolex.
All right. Go ahead. I'll start typing the poll.
I mean, Rolex, they're kind of in the same vein as most. Do they make a really darn fine watch? Yes, they do. Do they make an excellent watch in any shape or form? No, they do not. So I can't give them a 4 because there's no artisanal properties to it. And kind of like, I think what you said, Dennis, was just they don't innovate, similar to Breguet. They don't. They just do the same thing over and over again. So I can't really give them too much credit. They're a pretty solid 3 to me.
All right. A 3 from Patrick. Tony, your maybe favorite brand?
Oh, yeah. They're definitely way up there. They're way up there with me. No, I'll be honest. They make a good watch. They do. Mm-hmm. They're popular. And they are 100% too expensive for what they are. And I'll always believe that. But that doesn't mean they don't have great watches and good designs. I think I don't want to say they're a victim. I think their success is because of their popularity and because of their placement in the market and how they're seen as the great big luxury watch by non-watch people. And they do make a good thing. I'm going to put them at a 3. I mean, they're solid. They're definitely, as much as I joke and as much as I absolutely hate a couple of their watches that are some of their most popular watches, and I just think they're ugly. It doesn't change the fact that I'd be hard pressed to put them anything under a 3.
Okay, we got 2 3s so far. Yeah, Rolex is a tough one for me because they lean hard, obviously, into the sports watch, really the steel sports watch. And yeah, a lot of what they do, a lot of their, I guess, luxurification, is that a word? Well, we'll make it a word. The luxurification of their brand has seemed to mostly consist of taking all of their steel sports line and making them in platinum and gold. And that doesn't do it for me, but again, thinking about kind of those categories that I opened with, prestige-wise, are they the pinnacle of watchmaking? Absolutely not. However, to a lot of people, especially non-watch people, they do think it is the top-tier brand out there. Separately from that, because even though their prices have gone up significantly over the years, they are still seen as obtainable for a lot of people. Maybe at retirement, it may, maybe a few years, but for a lot of people, Rolex is what they aspire to. And we know about the shortages and stuff. So popularity is up there as well. Now, I agree with Patrick. my biggest frustration with Rolex is they don't do next to anything, like Sky Dweller aside, they basically don't engage in complications any fancier than a date complication. So they're not mechanically interesting to me, but the movements they make are exceedingly robust. In fact, other than Oris, who else offers a 10-year warranty and service interval, or I should say a 10-year service interval on their watches? I don't know of any other brand, Oris aside, and only on their in-house movement that Oris recently came out with. That's standard with Rolex. Their accuracy is standard. It's a very robust, hardy watch. So for those reasons, even though I think they're definitely not in the top tier in this 4-point scale, I will put them at great, because I think they're that popular. They're seen as that prestigious to the public writ large. And the bottom line is they make a hell of a watch. It ain't going to do anything fancy. The dial ain't going to blow your socks off, but it's going to work better than any Seiko movement you're ever going to get. As it should, because it's going to cost you 10 times as much. Unless we're talking about the King Seiko, in which case it will cost you 2.5 times as much for no obvious reason. But we're not here to judge the King Seiko yet. So I'm going to put it at a 4. What will the audience do? Surely the audience will agree with me. And yes, absolutely they do. 71% of them say it's great. So win the crowd and you win your freedom. I think Gladiator taught.
Oh, there's a rule
that.
Change all of a sudden.
So that averages it to a 3.5, which rounds up to a 4. So, but all right, the elephant in the room's out of the way. Tony, you can pick one.
Panerai.
Panerai. Oh, okay. Interesting. Are you a Paneristi, Tony?
I'm not.
All right. Well, what do you think of the brand?
I'm not actually a huge fan of the Panerai. I've tried several on. I've looked at them. They're overall, I know they're a well-respected line, and I don't know, something about them. I tried on a radio mirror. I tried on Mariner, something like that.
That sounds about right. I don't
something. It's the one with the protection on the crown. A Marina.
It's either going to be Luminor or the submersible, but probably the Luminor.
It's the Luminor. Based upon the one I just pulled up on my screen, it was a Luminor. So, and I mean, I like big watches, and still, it wasn't comfortable on my wrist. And I think it could have been a combination of the size, shape, the protection on the crown. I didn't like it overall. I'm not a big fan of the looks that they're going for. I know I've read a lot of people who really like the radio mirrors. And it seems like something that would be right up my alley based upon my actual like, but for whatever reason, something about them just itches me wrong. I think I'm going to put them at a 2. They're not poor. They make great quality stuff from everything I've heard, but something about them is just not. It's not at that same kind of level that I would expect for someone with their history and pricing.
Okay. All right. So an okay, level 2. Patrick, do you think they're a level 2?
I'm going to shock the world on this one, and I'm actually going to give them a 4. And before I get lynched, let me explain.
Whoa!
No,
we just counted each other out.
The reason for it, and I said, I know people are probably like, he's giving Panerai a 4 and Rolex a 3. Here's what I like about Panerai. They have a soul, and they do innovate. If Rolex did what Panerai did, I would love them equally much. Yes, I know there's lots of stuff where maybe your Panerai is going to be a fake and a this, and they don't have very good QC control sometimes. That I'm just kind of leaving out. But they make neat materials like carbon. They make neat materials like ceramics. They do platinum. They do gold. They do perpetual calendars and annual calendars and chronographs. Like, if they do crazy astronomia sort of things. I mean, if there's a complication out there, some Panerai does it, and I just think that deserves credit. As that all the watches look the same, and that's kind of cool too. But they don't mind taking risks, and I don't know who buys those watches, but they're out there, and I still think that's pretty cool. So I'm giving them a 4 for being noticeable from across the room. You know it's a Panerai, but you don't know what they've got in their hand until you see it. It could be a simple time only. It could be a platinum world time annual calendar. Who knows? And that's pretty cool to me.
Wow. Okay. Well, so far, no one's commented about the need for us to,
That's
get.
because everyone had a stroke. They're all dead. Your whole audience is dead. They all died.
Well, I am glad that Patrick has placed them so highly, because I'm putting them at 1.
Oh, I thought I was being harsh.
Trash tier brand, whatever they were, passed a long time ago. Their own team can't even tell the fakes from the reals, because they put that little effort into their own movements, if they're even their own. And don't worry, they'll claim that they are even when they aren't. Now, maybe I should let that go because that was over 10 years ago, but I haven't yet. Yes, Patrick is absolutely right. They do a lot of work and a lot of materials. So do a lot of other brands. So I don't understand why their pricing is so ridiculous. The moment they do I thought ceramic, that new Omega Special Formula ceramic $22,000 Seamaster was enough to give me a heart attack. But Panerai does that on the regular with any metal that isn't steel. Oh, even their lowest end dive watch. And I have to air quote that because they even have models now that don't even go 100 meters. Whatever they were, I think they lost their soul a long time ago. The one thing they've got is that one look, and they can't even keep it water resistant. It's a 1 to me. They could find their path again someday, but if they're just going to keep leaning on that same look, they're going to have to do more than mess around with the metals to win me over. So I'm putting them at a 1.
Oh, this is going to be amazing. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Love you, Panerai. Love you. And what do the people think? With a plurality, 44% poor. And I'm not voting in these polls on the online either, by the way.
Nor am I.
So that comes out at actually it comes out at your rating, Tony. That average exactly at a 2. Okay, so they're okay.
It's the power of average.
You're welcome, Ryan. We got you at 2.
Yeah. So, Scotty agreed with me, so I appreciate that. But yeah, it's one of those things. Okay. Gosh, this will be weird because I've been having you guys go so that I can type the poll at the same time. But let me, I'll do that again. I'll have Patrick lead off, but I'll go ahead and pick a brand this time. I feel like we need to harness the power of Merc a little bit. Let's do Timex. So, Patrick, what are your thoughts on Timex?
I mean, it's going to be a simple one. I have no thoughts on Timex, and for that reason, they're a 1 because they're absent. I mean, the only thing I think of with Timex is my dad used to have like Timex Iron Man, G-Shock wannabes that he would run with. And besides buying my dad a new one like every 1 or 2 years for Christmas because they broke, I can't actually think of anything. So Timex, you're a 1.
Oh, okay. Okay. Tony, Timex.
I'm going to put Timex at a 2. They're popular with a certain group. A lot of people like them, but a lot of people like just anything that's cheap and works. And I kind of fall into that zone with the Timex. They're okay. There's nothing about them that makes me think they're special. There's nothing about them. There are no Timexes on the list anywhere that I have any interest in. So, yeah.
Yeah. I haven't decided exactly where I want. It's definitely, I'm not putting them above it too. Patrick made a lot of really good points. There's nothing, they're doing more mechanical watches again now to obviously capitalize on consumer interest in mechanical watches, but they're very loud. And a lot of times they won't even tell you you can just pop back off and know what the movement is, but they won't even tell you what the movement is. So, which tells you they're not proud of what the movement is. Here's the one thing. I never owned an Ironman. I think my mom had one as one of her nursing watches back in the day. But here's the thing I struggle with. I was actually just at their website because they're doing a Black Friday sale, like all of the various smaller end brands have been doing, the ones usually on the lower end of the pricing segment. A lot of them have been doing Black Friday sales. Why do they have to like do every holiday with a Peanuts? Like they even have a Snoopy Thanksgiving watch. Who owns Thanksgiving clothes? It doesn't make any. It's a one. I'm just for that. Just for that. You're like a Christmas one, sure. A Halloween one, okay. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. There's probably a Father's Day version. The line must be drawn here, and that here was the moment they dressed up Snoopy as a pilgrim. So they need to get off the Peanuts bandwagon and actually. And I'd actually consider getting a couple of those Timexes, but I don't think they know what they're doing. So I think all they're doing is they're saying Charles Schultz sells, or kind of sells. So they're just throwing it.
Does he?
I don't know. The other thing they do are Marlins, but they put Snoopy on half of those. And they're pretty expensive for what they are. You can start getting some pretty nice Orients at that price point. So I'm going to actually go in at a pour here as well. I don't think they found their footing, whatever that might be. And according to the audience, 71% say poor as well. So anyway, yeah. So that averages out to a 1.25. So Timex is our first tier one, and one is bad in this. So, okay, Patrick, pick a brand.
Well, I'm going to be mean again. Tissot.
Well, they're a huge one because for whatever reason, my logo I found was a rectangle. But all right, what do you think of Tissot?
I am the owner of a Tissot PRX, and it is still a nice watch. I don't have anything really bad to say about it, but I can't lie to the world. It's a junk quartz that costs $350. It shouldn't probably cost more than $50. And for that reason, I think they're a name only. I think they pretty much make garbage watches, but they polish them up better than the next guy, and they've got a fancy Swiss name, which makes them sound better. Tissot is a one.
Whoa. See, this is why Patrick's on the panel, for the harshness. This is why I wanted him. Tony, have you had a Tissot, Tony? I don't recall.
I have not had a Tissot. Okay. I've looked at them and stuff, but there are no Tissots that have any interest to me at all. I mean, I was looking at the PRX, the automatic PRX when it came out for a little while. And then I realized that the quartz is pretty much the exact same thing and half the price. I have tried one on, as best as I could try one on, because it was nowhere near large enough to get around my wrist. And I'm not sold on the integrated bracelet, but I think it definitely has a place, and some people might have them in their collections. I just don't think it's going to be me at this point, unless they make some major changes to their design aesthetic, because I'm not really there with it. Like I was at one point. I kind of was there until I actually tried one on, and then I was like, no, this doesn't work for me. They've got some nice pieces, but no, I'm just going to go with, you know what? I'm going to want them also.
You're like, they have nice pieces. One,
they have stuff that looks okay, not on me, but I'm just I don't see the popularity. Yeah. I don't understand it.
Well, I'm with him, because I mean, the thing is, like, I don't think they make a bad. I think the PRX is a nice watch. It's just not a $350 and or $800 watch. And Beast Tuna just made a comment saying, it's good for a relative price point. I got this cool watch for like $300, and you just got to know where to look for it. And it's a limited edition of like only 300 on the planet. And as I said, it has personality, where to me, I just don't think Tissot has it. So as I said, I'm sticking to my one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give them a 2. I'm going to say they're, as a brand, they're okay. They're getting a lot of attention for the PRX. And if you want an integrated sports bracelet watch, it can be difficult to find them in price ranges under $1,000. Now, that's started to change a lot as the popularity of the integrated sports bracelet has become more and more notable, particularly since the pandemic. I do think that they lean too much on the PRX. I know, and I think might be someone in the live stream. I know got one, but I could not stand that digital LCD version that they came out with. That was, to me, it was just like, okay, the PRX is selling, guys. What do we do? Whatever we do, we got to just keep calling it PRX and we'll just slap different things in. And I think for me, that was more of an issue of, it was another throwback. But when you throw back to LCD screens in the 70s, they didn't know how to, in my opinion, they didn't know how to make that aesthetically pleasing. It was just trying to get the technology into the watches at the time. So I'm not a big fan of going back to the 70s look for LCDs. So, but I'm moving beyond that. It's just everything else. The Tissot Gentleman and all the it's all just kind of the same sort of thing. Like the PRX is notable because it's integrated bracelet, and I agree with both of you. You might as well just get the quartz instead of the mechanical version, which I did have one. It wore fine, but I had other watches that were nicer, and I just decided I'd rather just sell it. So I think it's got a spot as long as they can keep their pricing for a lot of this stuff under $1,000, even though you could argue, and Patrick did, that you can get a lot at a lower price than even that. It does make it very competitive in a marketplace, especially if people are only willing to buy new. So for those reasons, I think it's an okay brand. They're not listless, so I don't want to call them poor. I think they have a plan, but so far the plan just seems to be, let's just keep reskinning the PRX a whole bunch, which isn't my favorite plan, but hey, we've seen other brands kind of do that too. So anyway, so I'm going to throw them in at a 2. And let's see what the public thinks. Oh, they think a 2 as well, at 72% of the vote. Okay, so that is actually going to be a 1-1-2-2, which of course is going to split at a 1.5, which does round up. So they do end up slipping barely into okay, thanks to the power of the live audience. Tony, pick a brand. So many.
Let's go with the big dog. We're going to go with Casio.
God tier? You notice I don't have a God tier listed because I didn't want to call it God tier. But what are your thoughts while I pull it up?
My thoughts are what you just said, God tier. I think Casio, if you're talking about watches on a budget, nothing beats Casio. Not even going into the G-Shock line, just start setting in the standard Casios. For something on a budget, I'd rather have a Casio than a Tissot. I'd rather have a Casio than a Tyrant. I'd rather have a Casio than watches that cost twice as much as the Casios. They just hit that sweet spot, and they're in the right budget level. I'm absolutely considering going to a full metal G-Shock rectangle in addition to my current standard G-Shock rectangle, because I think those rectangles are just the absolute tops when it comes to a digital watch. I love them. They are just, and I think for me, it's worth the money. It's number 1, or well, number 4. It's great. It's God tier. It's the best thing there. Period.
Well, thank you, Nico. Excuse me, I mean Tony. Patrick, are you also putting them at a 4?
This is a tough one because everything that Tony just said is true, but at the same time, I have to look at them as an overall brand and just say it's a 20-cent quartz module put into a resin strap, and they're charging you on a good day $50 for the low one, on the bad day $20,000 for one on a gold bracelet. And part of that's pretty insane, but I'm going to take my somewhat biases out of them being all over the place and just say it's a good rugged watch for what it is. No way is it a 4, but I can give it a 3.
Okay. Excuse me. And I'm with Patrick. I'm going to give it a 3. I've looked at other G-Shocks. I have a G-Shock, a square G-Shock. I think Tony and I might actually own the exact same model.
We have the exact same model.
I thought it looked very similar. And I've looked at some other ones, including the metal ones. And again, everything you said, Tony, is right. They're super robust. They've got good water resistance. They've got a whole bunch of different colors. You have all these choices, very approachable. If you wanted to just collect Casios, you could just collect G-Shocks and not even but there are other Casios in that lineup, some of which are very, very, very approachable in terms of pricing, like the 91F or whatever, for example. I think I named a movement from Grand Seiko instead of the actual model of the Casio. But anyway, they got the little $15 ones and stuff. So it's definitely a good brand. Definitely. The reason I can't put them at great is while I think they are very, very popular, so they score really high, they're not seen by most people as a prestigious brand, and that's fine. Complication-wise, again, it's almost always the same modules. They don't seem to really be pushing the envelope on anything. It's just new collaborations with new straps that turn yellow because they look like jellyfish, and they are not, they're not designed to stay in the sun. Like, they're very disposable, and I think there's a place for watches like that, which is why I never considered getting rid of my G-Shock, but I can't put them at great. Because I think basically they do the square and then they do the other giant Mudmaster wannabe thing. And that's sort of like their two basic shapes. And then, of course, you have the non-G-Shock lines, which are just not very popular. So I think it's a good watch brand. They've diversified really well. It'll be interesting to see if that strategy can hold in the face of all the smartwatches, because that's really eating into their price tier where a lot of their watches are at. You're right around where you can start getting Apple Watches and stuff. And I think those are the brands like Tissot that are going to get squeezed the most. And that's why they're so desperate to find something that they can latch onto. I think Casio might have the cachet just to endure anyway. But to me, they're just good. I can't put them in the very highest category. But that's just me. However, the audience does not agree with me. And the audience seems to agree with Tony. 45% of them agree and say it's great. So 4 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 is going to average out to a 3.5, which of course means it's going to be a 4. So Casio does end up in God tier.
Oh man, we are hype beasts. We've got
That's
Rolex.
That's what we do. That's what we do. So
I almost feel dirty.
I do too.
Well, no one here dislikes the Casio. When there's only 4 tiers, you gotta dredge up the drama as best you can. I guess it's my turn to go ahead and pick a brand. Let me pick one that, well, we've been doing a lot of these lower, more affordable ones. Let's keep up with that streak. Let's do Hamilton. Patrick, I'd love your thoughts on Hamilton while I type a poll.
You're just trying to get me in trouble.
That's the whole purpose of this stream, is basically to see if you survive.
I am spoiled because I am a pocket watch fan, which means my Hamilton is not your Hamilton. And I don't like them one single bit. So I am going to give my very biased 1.
Whoa.
I just don't like that they were bought out and they're just pretending that they're the same. It's the equivalent of the Disney remakes. Like, if you can't come up with your own story, don't just change it. Just make your own and come up with a new name. So Hamilton doesn't mean anything to the Swiss. Same thing with the Waltham brand and the Elgin brand that were bought. I just, let them die. If you want to make up a watch, just make up a watch and put a new name on it. So I'm not a fan.
A 1. Okay. Wow. You really don't want to survive, is what I think. This is what we call Death Witch. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I think Hamilton's, I like a lot of their designs. I've heard some stuff about them that makes me wonder about quality control. I've heard enough issues on that, but most of their stuff falls directly into my zone of like. That said, I am going to probably put them as a 2. I think they're all right. They've got some really good watches. They've got some really bad watches. They have a terrible naming scheme because everything's a khaki anymore. Even if they don't look anything like any other khakis, it's still a khaki. It's just all khaki. It's just khaki all the way down. But it is definitely a brand that has, like many others, locked itself into the minds of people because they've been able to integrate themselves so well in movies and TV. They're you see them everywhere. They're a super commonly seen watch, and they have a lot of ones that look pretty good, but I'm just not huge on them.
Yeah, I'm going to drop them in at an okay, at a 2 as well. And I think Jewelry here in the live chat kind of summarized my thoughts, perhaps the most succinctly, which is the love and hate situation. I like a lot of the aesthetics, especially, they're kind of, if you say the word, or 2 words, I should say, the phrase field watch, Hamilton khaki field is one of them. I don't know which of the 30,000, but one of them is what I think of. It's what pops into my head. I had a khaki pilot watch, and aesthetically it was great, and mechanically it was not. And I am not the only person I've heard repeatedly complain about issues with movements that are stuck in those Hamiltons. And so it's just, I don't know if I'll ever own another one or not, because the Hamilton I owned is the only watch, and I've gotten rid of a number of them, is the only watch I truly hated. Now, I was new into watches, and it's not one of their field watches. And I'm gonna blame almost all of that on the Valjoux wannabe movement that was in that thing. But yeah, it's if you really want a Swiss watch and you like the field watch aesthetic, it's definitely the brand you're probably going to look at. I would encourage you to maybe look at some other brand like Marathon and consider one of their field watches instead. But it is under Swatch Group, so parts and stuff are going to be readily available. So that's the one advantage to them and where they're at now. So anyway, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I just it doesn't resonate with me, but I understand why people would go after it. They do have a very nice dial aesthetic for their field watches. It's probably my favorite design aesthetically, but not mechanically. So anyway, so that's why I end up there. However, the audience actually is split between good and okay, 33% each for those. So we'll give that a 2.5 because we do decimals with the audience out of fairness to them. So 7.5 divided by 4 equates to a 1.875. So they end up at an okay. Yeah.
They're okay.
Yeah, they're okay. All right. Patrick, would you like to pick a brand?
Well, just so I could make more people angry at me, is Audemars Piguet on that list?
Audemars Piguet is very hard to read, but there it is, right there.
Okay. As I said, I don't know if people are going to agree with me or hate me for it, but I have to give them a solid 2. And the reason for that is I just don't think they're that good. And I'll give you the quick explanation for it. Most of their heyday, they didn't even make their own watch. JLC made all of their movements in their heyday. And only until about 5 to 10 years ago did they actually start putting their own movements in it. And, I haven't heard great things about the reliability, the timing, the anything of their movement. So all we're really excited about is that someone spent some time polishing an outside case that you're going to wear, hopefully, and scratch the hell up. That doesn't excite me in any shape or form. And the only one that I like is a vintage one that comes in a weird material, and it's only because it comes in a weird material. So, I'm sure they're prestigious, but they don't sing in any other song to me. So they are a strong 2.
Part 2. All right, Tony, do you agree with Patrick? Is AP
I do.
nearly okay? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, they're the Royal Oak. That's what everyone talks about is the Royal Oak. I mean, yeah, they've got the code 1159, but it's no, you don't hear about it. Half of them, and when you do hear about it, it's somebody complaining that it's not a Royal Oak. I don't think the Royal Oak's that impressive of a design. I find it almost humorous that some of the best homages out there are Royal Oak like and come off better. I think that they are very much living on the name and laurels at this point, and I think that they need to make changes before things start falling apart. But I'm probably wrong because their popularity is just that high. Just not for me.
Yeah, again, I'm trying to look past just like my own all right, the Royal Oak, it's attractive. It's not my cup of tea. Like I think it looks a lot better than the Nautilus, but that's because I think the Nautilus is pretty ugly. And there are other integrated styles that I prefer over the Royal Oak, is maybe a better way to phrase it. They are the Royal Oak Company at this point. No one cares about the 1159 other than like the Star Wheel or whatever they came out with in a desperate attempt to appeal to people to like their dress watches. I think because here's my theory. I think the C-suite with AP has a chip on their shoulder about not being seen as a respected dress watchmaker anymore because all they make are sports watches. And I think when they hear people like Thierry Stern going out there saying, we've got a 10-year wait list for the Nautilus, so we're discontinuing the 5711 because we don't want to just be known as some sports watch company. And they can't afford to do that at AP. They have to be known as the Royal Oak Company. It's the only thing that keeps them afloat. So they're still very prestigious, but only if you want a Royal Oak are they popular. So, and mechanically, they do have complications. That's the thing. They do have complications. Granted, they're almost all tourbillons at this point that they stick into more Royal Oaks, into concepts and stuff. I don't know what they're doing. Well, no, I do. They want to appeal to a younger audience, but now we're getting weird watch collaborations where there aren't even markings on the dial, and dead people are sitting in plastic lawn chairs with their watches dangling off their wrist, and it's creepy. And they're a 2. They're getting a 2 because of the creepy lawn chair lady. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't even remember what the collaboration, some clothing collaboration. It was awful, absolutely awful. And I think they can pull out of this. I think they're probably going to find footing on the 1159 eventually. The response to the latest models is much better than the launch, but I don't know. They're not. It's weird. I could see putting them at good, but I'm going to put them at okay just because they're just relying too much on the Royal Oak. It's like over half their lines at this point, with the offshore and the concepts and all that. So for that reason, I want to decimal it, but I can't decimal it myself. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll put them at an okay as well. So far we're all at 2s. Surely the audience is going to disagree with us, right? I mean, come on, guys, save us from ourselves. And let me end that poll and my screen. Okay, nope, 33% plurality. This one was very split,
Wow.
but okay is what won out on that. So it's a 2 by everyone.
Man, and here I thought I was controversial.
No, that one was interesting because great was next at 25% and good was also 25% and poor was 16%. So yeah, everyone was all over. This was a very divisive company. I think it really comes down to whether or not you want to put a lot of stock on the Royal Oak or not. But we all acknowledge that. So I think, I think we had a pretty reasoned take on that. Thank you for suggesting that one, Patrick. I think AP might have been our most interesting discussion thus far. Tony, can you top it? What do you want?
Let's talk JLC.
Oh, Patrick just brought up how they used to supply all the movements to AP. So, what are your thoughts on the JLCs, Tony?
JLC is one of those brands that I feel has done something truly remarkable at one point and now rest on their laurels for the most part. And I still think they do good. The Reverso is an amazing watch, and I would love to have a Reverso. I think it is just an amazing piece of tech and just works beautifully well. I would put them at good, with a caveat that, again, if this was a 5 tier, I would probably put them in the middle, just because the way they have been going lately, with some of their pricing and stuff, is starting to make them become even less acceptable than they were already. You're muted, Dennis, or I'm muted.
No, you're fine. I was
Okay.
still muted, so you didn't hear my keyboard go clicky click as I typed the poll. I was asking. I didn't get it in my. I didn't type in what you scored it at.
No, I went with the 2.
2? Okay. Patrick.
I have to say I'm on team 2, and the reason is kind of most of everything that Tony just said, but I'll throw in one more little barb. They have so much potential and it's wasted. I think they're better watchmakers than pretty much your Pateks and your well, maybe not as Patek. Pateks, their high end is better, but regular Pateks. So, they've got more consistent watchmakers than just about any other brand out there. But my gripe is they make nothing fun. I can't think of a single watch that I go, ooh, that's exciting. I mean, except for that like 10-page Reverso they made that had like 80,000 complications, but that's not even real. That's just a fake thing that they made one of, and
they
act
made
like
10, but at $1.3 million, maybe only
Yeah.
one actually truly got built.
So the idea is, they don't make anything exciting, and for that reason, as I said, I just got to put them in the, they. If they were my child, I would say you disappoint me, and that's a horrible commentary. So, they're definitely not a 1 because they make great watches. They're definitely not a 4 because they don't make the best of the best, but they should be a 3, but they're a solid 2.
You know what? Yeah, I'm gonna be on team 2 as well for a few different reasons, but obviously the end result is what ultimately matters. No, they make a beautiful watch, and yes, they're mostly known for the Reverso. So they actually suffer from a lot of similar problems to what AP does, but a few are different. So, like, yeah, the Polaris is long in the tooth. And whatever they did with the new dials, as attractive as they were, that's not what was meant by the need. Like, that needs a refresh. Like, the movement isn't even, and watchmaker, they're supposed to be known for movements. They yet again turned out some very attractive Reversos this year. I do have a Reverso, but as Robert pointed out in the chat, these price increases that Richemont is having JLC do are absolutely ridiculous. The value secondhand on my Reverso is so much higher than what I paid at this point that I'm seriously considering letting it go to get a higher end dress piece, because I think that and I just have a steel monoface, is so overvalued at this point. I probably should let it go and get something gold, which would not be a JLC because I couldn't afford it because of how much they've gone up. It's like they've decided, well, it's JLC. So Richemont's like, this is going to be in competition at the price point with Vacheron. And it's like, JLC might make a nicer watch than Vacheron, but the public doesn't think that. So what are you doing here? We're used to the world where, master ultra thins are under $10,000 used. You can't force it to be a $30,000 watch just because you raise the prices twice a year. That's not how this works. So there are 2, because they're making all the wrong decisions on where they are in the market. And the problem is, I'm punishing them mostly here by saying from good to okay, because they're raising their prices without improving the watches. It's the same movements. It's the same models. You can't pull the wool over everyone's eye. Yeah, the common person off the street who doesn't collect watches might not know that price was 40% less a year ago, but Pepperidge Farm remembers, and I'm Pepperidge Farm.
Yeah.
So
these watches already have a double 40% price increase, so they can't cry to me and say that they don't make money on these watches.
Yeah,
so,
just
don't need the price increase.
Their strategy as a brand is not, in my layperson's opinion is not the right strategy. So they're down to okay because of that. And I love the Reverso. And honestly, I think their master ultra thins are really attractive too. If you like dress watches, JLC is definitely a brand to look at. My advice to you is look at it on the secondhand market. You can save a lot of money doing that. However, the audience feels differently than us. It was close between good and great, but good won with 50% and great was 42%. So they definitely feel we are far too hard on this company. But
nobody said okay. Nobody
said okay, except us. And we're the ones that matter because of the way the averaging worked. Comes out at a 2.25, which rounds down to 2. So what can you do? Just one of those tough things. You know what? Let's go ahead and I guess my turn. Let's do Patek. All right. We've been mentioning them a couple times. Patrick, you're into pocket watches. Patek still makes them.
Well, see, you're bringing up a sour point. Patek Philippe actually never made their own pocket watches. So all of their movements were just debauched movements that they just put a little spit and polish on. So I have absolutely no love for Patek pocket watches. Well, maybe they're minute repeaters. Maybe they did those. But every normal watch they ever made, wasn't even made by them. Similar to how JLC made their old movements. They just didn't make movements. So they don't really get me with their old school stuff. Like, I don't care that they're an old company. I care about what they make now and what they make that's cool. And probably the only watch that they make that I just think has a neat vibe is the Patek Neptune, but the one that's got the steel beads of rice bracelet, and it's got a couple little faces on it. I think it's got a power reserve and maybe a GMT hand.
I don't even know if I've seen the Neptune.
It's old.
Maybe once.
Like, they probably haven't made it for 15 years, but I look at it and I at least think it's cool. It's got the branding off to the side like the Studio Underdog watch does. So they did it first. It's just a cool looking watch, but as I said, besides that, they're kind of in the low personality club. Their ultra high end is super ultra high end. Obviously they're great watchmakers. So for watchmaking, I'd have to give them a 4, but for general everything, they're still a 3.
Okay, 3 it is. Tony, your thoughts on Patek?
I mean, they have some interesting stuff out there. They have the Nautilus, like you mentioned before, is one of those things that I think is a love or hate. I fall into the hate on the Nautilus, but they've got some interesting watches in their complication line and their grand complication line. But overall, at the price points and what they have, there are other companies that I would rather spend that money with at the same price area. So I'm going to also put them as a 3. They're good, but they're definitely not as high and mighty as they should be. I'm going to go with as they should be, but there are some watches in the grand complication lines that are just super impressive. That's for sure.
Okay, another 3. No, I will give them the 4, which is what you both should have done, but couldn't bring yourself to. So, and here's why. Again, it's not about what I want. So, like, are they prestigious? Absolutely. In terms of like mass-produced watches, they are at the yes. You can argue like Grupo Forsey and independent watchmakers being better than Patek. Absolutely. But in terms of substantive quantities of watches, they are at the top of the game in the eyes of most people. They're very popular on a few of their lines, mostly the sports lines, which are, in my opinion, less interesting. But in their opinion, they're less interesting, which is why they have always, even when demand was there, they did not pull an AP and start just turning out a bunch of Nautili instead of focusing on what they think is the true challenge to them, which is their grand complications. And they have attractive, simple lines as well that get outside of the sports line, like the Calatrava line, which I think deserves credit for. It might not be everyone's favorite configuration. You might prefer a Saxonia, you might prefer a Patrimony, but the Calatrava is the first, as far as I'm concerned, of the quasi Bauhaus clean dress watch look. And so, yes, there are things that Patek does that annoys me. I think that they overprice their steel watches by way more than they should. I also think that it's a little tacky, especially when you see a company like Longa putting in design effort, no matter what tier the watch is in, that Patek decorates their movements harder, or they try harder when you move up in dollar points, but in their lower end, they don't try as hard. But all that said, it's a 4. They do it right in so many ways. They clearly know how to make watches, and they keep pushing themselves on the complication side. So I have to put them at a 4. So that's where I end up. But does the public agree with me, or did you win them over to the 3s? No, you did not. Great wins at 53%. So that's a 4.433, which averages out to a 3.5, which means we finally get to add a third great to the list.
Tony, we're still hype beasts. All the hype brands, they're at the top. We're still dirty.
Yeah, it's this. Look, it's science. Had David been here from Canada, he got his laptop working. Those Canadians, they come in voting Oris for everything, and it has shaken this whole thing up. But that is not the world we live in. But for the world we do live in, Patrick, you get to pick a brand. If you need help in seeing any, I can tell you some.
Well, I feel like I've been negative, so I'm going to throw some positivity into this world. Do we have Longa on the list?
Yes. Okay. Yes, we do.
All right. You mentioned them in your Patek, horrible rant. And, I don't necessarily like all of Longa's watches. I mean, I don't think the Odysseus is what it should have been. I think they could have made it a little bit better, but they did a fine job with it. The part that I guess I have to say I love about Longa, though, is, they make some absolutely mind-boggling watches, like their, the jumping hours and all the cool complications they do. But the fact that they take every watch apart, build it, take it apart again, and rebuild it just to make sure that everything and every nut and bolt is perfectly squeezed in there and can be taken out again, that just sings such a respect song to me that they deserve the illustrious 4.
Okay. And hey, I highlighted it. David is singing your praises in the chat. This is why Patrick is here. Patrick will tell it like it. He doesn't care how hype something is. So we got a 4 for Longa from Patrick. Tony, your thoughts on A Langenzone?
Anybody who has seen me on this show in the past knows where I'm going to go with this. There are
1. Oh,
I
3
mean,
more than
I don't think Longa has a bad watch. When we did the Dream List one not that long ago, I put the Odysseus, that limited edition Odysseus from this year, at the top of my list. But I don't think they make an ugly watch. Everything they do is just beautiful and an amazing combination of complications and the look. The Zeitwerk is just such an amazing watch to me. Everything about it. And I can say that about every single watch they have. I love them all. It is definitely a 4 for me. They just seem to hit all the exact right notes for me.
Okay, a second 4. Interesting comments as well. I'm sorry I can't read the chat, but we had so many brands for time purposes is why I'm just mostly throwing them up, if you were wondering. Those that usually watch know I usually read most of these aloud, but we have a show structure to stick with. And I mentioned that because of some of the interesting comments that have come in. I'm a 4 as well. A few years ago, I wouldn't have been able to give them a 4 again, because I'm trying to at least hang everything on those 3 Ps to try and be fair. I'm a big Longa fan. I love their dress watch lines. I think their sports watch lines are really interesting. Before they really got those, it was really that chronograph. And then from then on, where I think they started to at least have some models that are really, really popular. Yes, they end up making everyone buy a bunch of Saxonias and Longa ones to get those. Just like it's difficult to get the APs you want. And so they have certain models that are really popular and other models that, hey, if you're into them, you can get them on the cheap. I saw David had noted in the chat about how he doesn't like the dials because he finds them really cold. And that's actually what I like about Longa. I like that. It's a very German look. And I like that clinicality to it. I like that golden ratio of the Longa 1 and the mathematical precision that it executes on. But I know that that's polarizing for some because they prefer the more romantic style. Likewise, I know Ken had noted something about that. One of the things he takes issue with is that Longa it's owned under we call that a conglomerate brand. They're owned under a group, and I do wonder if they would be even more interesting if they were independent still. I don't know, but what they do currently is interesting enough to me. I think they make great watches, and as I noted in the Patek segment, it doesn't matter how cheap, and they're not cheap, but how cheap of a Longa you get. They're going to put in that effort to decorate that movement at the same tier. They're going to, obviously, the chronographs have more parts, so they might be more visually interesting, but they try on all of their movements. I can't say the same for Patek. I think Patek has an attractive movement in the low end, but they try a lot harder when you get into the grand complications. I think Longa always tries, and for that reason, I will give them a 4 as well. So, do the public agree with us? They do. 61% of them agree that it is a great brand. So the calculator is not even needed. Everything was a 4.
Now that's our first 4 across the board, correct?
I think you're correct.
Yeah,
I think so.
Longa winner of the night so far.
Wow. You see, you kumbaya'd us together, Patrick. It was your leadership and inspiration that have brought us to this point. And that's going to make it even harder for Tony because he has to pick the next brand.
Man, we've been pulling the big dogs out here for a while. We started with all the low end, and then we jumped to the big dogs. So let's go ahead and just keep rolling those, and we'll go ahead and pull Vacheron out.
All right. All right, Tony, I know you've mentioned liking some of the Vacheron watches, so I'm wondering if you're going to be a 4 or a 3 here.
I mean that's the question. Is it a 4 or a 3? They are beautiful watches. They've got great lines. The Historique line, I don't know that they've got a watch in the Historique line that I don't like. The American 1921s are great. The 1942 is great. The 222 is, quite frankly, I consider it probably the most lovely dress watch I've ever seen. It's my absolute favorite of that style. But I don't put them quite as high as I would put Longa because there are watches they have that I don't really care for. It's tough for me. I think I am going to go with a 3. I would like to argue the 4, but they have stuff in them that just doesn't let me quite go. With Longa, it was easy to go 4 because I don't have anything bad with them. With Vacheron, there's stuff that I'm less interested in. There's stuff that is less special to me. But some of the stuff they do, their art tribute watches are just pure beauty in a completely unusable jewelry form. They're what's it called? Let me look real quick. The Patrimony? I like the Patrimonies a lot, but they've got stuff that is less popular. It's less good. I think their quality is high. I've never heard any complaints on quality on Vacherons. I think their little tricks with their fast change straps are great. I'm definitely going to say a 3, a high 3 on Vacheron for me.
We don't have high 3s.
I know.
We have 3s. We have 3s. We have 3. Okay, so it's a 3. Patrick,
I'm going to put it as a 3.
Is it a 3, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm gonna say they're on the 3-4 cusp. To be fair, I just don't think they're cool enough for the 4. But I'm going to do something rare in my world, and I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt because I do think they make some cool watches. I actually probably like the previous version of the overseas with the Grand Date because I just think it gave it some personality. But they have the ability to throw some personality in watches that sometimes aren't so full of personality. So, do they earn a strong 4? No. But I'm going to give them the 3.51 that bumps them up to a 4. So, I'm actually going to give them a 4.
Okay. 4 from Patrick, 3 from Tony. I'm a 3. Prestigious, absolutely. Can they do impressive complications? Absolutely. They're just not popular enough. And that's why I pull them down. The overseas was not a hot watch until you couldn't get a Nautilus or a Royal Oak during the pandemic. And you can now readily get overseas if you really want them, especially if you're willing to go back a couple of gens. The 222 is awesome, but it's just a remake. And what was the big thing when they rebrought? And I love the 222 that they've come out with, but what's the big thing everyone asked for when the 222 came out? The new one. Where is it in steel? Which is what the old one was in. In fact, the overseas is their modern interpretation of the 222. It's the same bezel. That's why the 222 is just an overseas. So, yeah, it's good. This is a brand that I think definitely shouldn't be shackled anymore under their conglomerate. If they were independent again, maybe they could have a soul. But they make wonderful, beautiful watches. I actually prefer a lot of their dress line to Pateks, but like broadly speaking, I think it's just a good brand now. I don't think it's great. If I was to kick anything out of the Holy Trinity, it'd be Vacheron at this stage, and put Longa in there and let you guys deal with some Germans. But so I'm gonna give it a 3. But it's a middling low 3. Since you all had to be weird with your numbers, I'd be like a 3.2, which rounds down to a 3. So that's where I'd be at on it. However, the live stream audience does not agree with me. They agree with Patrick. 58% great. So
higher than I thought.
That's right. Higher than I thought too. So that's going to break out to a 3.5, and you know the rules of math. So that means Vacheron, you get to stay in the Trinity, or in this case, what, the Sextinity. Why do we only have one good brand? This is weird. This chart is not looking like how I would want it to look.
Well, to be fair, in my personal opinion, a couple of those in 4 should be down in that good area.
It's the audience. They've tilted it to the 4s because I've said 3 more than any other number.
Dennis or David wants me to stop brown nosing these watch companies. I'm trying to be I'm trying to think about how the public would think about them. I'm the voice of the public. And I was harder on Vacheron than everyone else, including the audience. So give me a little bit of credit. I tried to pull that one down to Breguet level, but y'all wouldn't let me. Y'all love your 222s, so we're just going to have to live with that. I'm tired of talking about these really expensive brands. So I'm going to say the next one we're going to talk about is Orient. If I can move it so you can see it. All right. So Orient, owned by Seiko. I have to type the poll, so I better not start. Patrick, I'll let you start while I type the poll.
I have to feign ignorance on Orient. I mean, I know the whole Seiko story and the two, sides, the Epson and the knot, and I've done my research on him, but I've never held an Orient in the hand, so I really don't have enough information to give a valid opinion. But I'm going to randomly assume that I think they're pretty good, particularly for the price. So I'm going to give a uninformed 3.
An uninformed 3 it is. All right, Tony, Orient.
I'm going to go ahead and give them. You know what? I'll give them a 3. Yeah. There's nothing super standout about them in my mind. They've got a lot of nice watches at the price. The biggest thing to me is even at that price point, they've only got a watch or two that I might be interested in over going to somebody else in a similar price range, a Seiko or a someone close in range. I mean, there's just too many watches that it's like, oh yeah, that's okay, and I'd just rather have something else.
Okay. I do own an Orient. It's interesting. So I usually promote Orient to a lot of people that if you're hell bent on getting a mechanical watch, I would encourage you to look at Orient especially if you don't want to really consider diving into micro brands. So because the price point's really good. On paper, the movements in the baseline Orient watches are actually spec'd more accurate than the 4R line out of Seiko. Now, I've heard anecdotally that the Orients tend to be more more on the extreme edges of that rating than the Seiko 4Rs tend to be. But on paper, it's a more accurate movement. I'm going to go ahead and put them a 2 as an okay brand. I mean it truly. It is an okay brand to go and consider. But you need to understand, and a lot of this is just going to be a virtue of the pricing. It's a less popular model in and of itself. The bracelets are not great, though I do like their cotter pin format versus the pin and collar that Seiko tends to favor on the lower price end. But their watches, to me, they just kind of all look sort of the same. Like they all have that Kano Kamasu sort of look to them. And maybe they probably have other watches, but honestly, it's always the dive watches everyone talks about. So if you want that prototypical dive watch, it's an okay brand to go ahead and consider. But I can't say that they're a good brand. I just don't. Plus, you know what? Where I would have leaned to them putting them good, I'm going to knock them back one, because any brand in this day and age that's going to release a watch like they did this year and misprint the minute track and actually screw it up on a dial and not catch it in QC deserves to get knocked down a grade. I never did a video on that movement. That might make my list of 5 worst watch releases of the year, though. I'm contemplating it, but I'm going to knock them back on that, because a company that big actually putting 2 of the minute tracks side by side, like it's not laid out right. They botched where the minutes were. Actually, they did it twice in 2 different spots on the dial. It was an absolute embarrassment. They're okay. They're fine. But what does the audience think? Okay, the audience agrees. 63% say okay as well. So that's 2 3s and 2 2s, which means it does end up as a good. You guys win. Once again, y'all win. I lose. Dennis is the loser.
I say you got your wish, Dennis. We got an extra 3 on there.
So in a way I still won, even though my arguments didn't win. I mean, I may have won the crowd, but I didn't win my freedom. Patrick, what brand would you like us to do next?
Well, since we just did Orient, I think we need some Seiko in our lives.
That's a good point. And Von Kroll did ask, I will call this one out, about Orient Star. Orient Star, I don't know if they're their own brand or not. If they are, it just didn't end up in my list. Again, we left off a lot of brands, including some big ones like Ulysse Nardon. Even though I do have GP in here, I only mentioned them side by side because of they used to both be under the Carrying Group. But Seiko it is. Patrick, go ahead.
I mean, this is the easiest answer ever. Seiko is a ginormous 4 because they do everything. If you want to go down a rabbit hole of cool, you can find a Seiko anything from it might be a quartz, but a perpetual calendar to a Grand Seiko, a tourbillon, to odd metals, odd shapes. They're a collection in themselves. So I just have to give them mad props for just being so everything, and I love them. 4.
All right, Patrick got a 4. Tony, what are your thoughts on Seiko?
I'm not going to rank them a 4. I will put them at a 3. Patrick's not wrong. They are where you can get anything. They've got great quartz watches. They've got great mechanicals. They've got interesting designs. They've got collaborations. Do you want a collaboration with Honda because you love the Super Cub? They have it. You want a collaboration with Hello Kitty because you love Hello Kitty? They have it. They make some of the best connections when it comes to stuff like that. And they have a lot of variety. And, if their quality control was a little better, if their bracelets were consistently a better quality than a lot of them turn out to be, they would be a 4. But I can't see them any lower than a 3, just based upon how wide they've gone, how many options they have. They've got some watches that are just so iconic that it'd be a shame to put them anywhere lower. You'd be lying to yourself to do it.
All right, so Tony's a 3, Patrick is a 4. Gosh, this one's tough. They're very popular, so that would really skew them up for me. They do a number of complications. Yes, a lot of them are quartz powered, but they do have them. Prestige, no, not really there. Yeah, so for that reason, probably a 3. And yeah, I replied in the chat. No, Grand Seiko's its own company now. I actually thought they were apparently the thing. I added some icons to my list here, but apparently Grand Seiko wasn't in the one I poached it from, or anyway, it didn't get in the list. So that will have to be in a round 2 because I knew Crador wasn't in this list, which is another Seiko conglomerate. Seiko's like its own conglomerate. So they own Orient and Orient Star. They own Seiko. They own Grand Seiko, which was spun off in 2017 or 2018 as its own company. And Crador are all under the Seiko umbrella. So this would just be regular Seiko. I don't understand what Seiko's doing lately with their pricing, but we're not really judging per se on pricing, but they're all over the map with, like, why is the King Seiko such an expensive thing when all it seems to be is it's got a really cool bracelet and it's like driven by the same 6R that's in a bunch of Prospex watches. I do have a Seiko. It's a Prospex. It's a 4R movement. It's nice. I like it. There's a lot to, I could never, Seiko would have to really screw up for me to ever put them lower than a 3, but I won't put them at a 4. Too many limited editions also. I'm going to punish them a little bit for that. But bottom line is it's not a prestige brand. They own prestige brands, but because of that, they're close. Yeah, but I'll be with Tony here on this. I'll give them a 3. I think they're a solid 3. What does the audience think? The audience is not with me and Tony. They're with Patrick. Patrick, you have won the crowd now. 72% say this brand is great. Tony and I are stupid for daring question anything other than a pure 4, which of course means they score a 3.5, which means great is now in line. This is the weirdest sort of chart. I wondered how this was going to shake out.
So messed up.
Well, because it's only 4 tiers, so YouTube could vote. I wondered how this was going to make things look because you're really compressing the scale here. But it's fascinating. So I'm pleased with it no matter how it shakes out. Okay, so Patrick picked the Seiko line. So Tony, what would you like to go with?
Well, let's grab that Christopher Ward.
Christopher Ward, the British brand. All right. What do you think of the Christopher Ward, Tony?
Christopher Ward is one of those that has rapidly climbed in popularity recently. I feel like a lot of that has been based upon just the Bel Canto, which I don't like. But at the same time, they do have some good looking watches, and I like some of the things they have been doing with their watches. I like the Dune series of watches. I like the Sealander GMT, but I think they're so young that it's hard to see where they're going in the future. They have the promise to be something great, but how many times have we seen that promise die on the vine? I'm going to put him at a 2.
Okay, a 2 from Tony. Patrick, are you familiar with Christopher Ward?
Oh, very familiar with Christopher Ward. I'm going to be mean and I'm going to be nice at the same time. I think Christopher Ward has an absolutely wonderful management structure. I think the owners of the brand truly love the brand, and I think they're truly watch people, which makes me love them. I think they're in so much trouble for the future, though, because they built themselves as a kind of wannabe basement brand. And now some of the watches they're making aren't so bargain basement. So I think their fans are going to revolt. The problem is, I don't think their watches are nice enough that they would deserve the higher echelon. So they're not low tier, they're not high tier, but I think they made their buying group angry at them. So they're kind of going to get lost. But that aside, I don't think they're the greatest watches in the world, but I think they're pretty darn nice. So I have to give them a 3.
Okay. I like me as a collector personally have zero interest in Christopher Ward. I find their strategy in a way makes sense to me, but also annoys me at the same time. So like my hat's off to them for not being a company that just takes some model and clones it, and makes a a knockoff version, an homage, if you want to use the vernacular that we collectors are so fond of. So I respect them for not doing that. But what they seem to do is just take 5 watches in the same model family, like integrated bracelet, and then glue them all together to be their own thing without me seeing a lot of creativity in my view. But a lot of stuff's been done already, so I might be just judging it too harshly. And I'm not going to factor that in on the scoring. I'm going to put them at a 3 as well. Their historic pricing model has been very approachable for collectors, and I think been very fair, and I think has been very appealing to a lot of people for that reason. I do agree with Patrick. I think the Bel Canto gave them a taste of like moving up market, and now it's like there's these 2 pulls. There's that desire to push the edge and do some more stuff and move past $1,000 price points, and then there's the audience that was always used to getting the coupon and going after that. I think I've always heard very good things about their watch. I've not handled the watch, so I have to go off of feedback from others. I've always heard they're robust, they're well built, customer support is great, the brand management is great. So I'm going to give them a 3 out of those things, even though it's a brand I don't ever see myself owning myself. But it's not about me; it's about the people. So anyway, so I'm going to put them at a 3 also. So we've got a 2 from Tony and a 3 from Patrick and myself, and a 3 from the audience, apparently. So the audience, 69%, also gave them a good. So, hey, we get to put another one up here with Orient.
I was the low man on the totem pole.
Yeah.
But only one. It's only, as I learned when we did this with Rolex last weekend, as long as it's not 2 standard deviations away, usually most people won't be all super judgmental about it. It's when you score something a good and it comes in at a poor, that's when they're like, what were you smoking? Because otherwise you're just one move away. So I think a lot of one of those things. Before I pick a brand, there were a few comments. Actually, David's been very active in chat. He asked, what's wrong with doing one thing perfectly? I would say nothing from a watch brand. And that might not mean they get to, the way we're doing these rankings, end up at the top of the list, but that's kind of like what Panerai does, right? They have that one look. I've often wondered, why not come out with some dress watches, other than they don't sell, which is probably reason enough. But it's just, they do one thing, and you can decide if they do one thing well or not. And I did see him also asking about, Patrick, what's best of the best. I saw you replied in chat. I wasn't quite sure what the context was. What would be best of the best? Are we talking about like movement or dial or brand strategy? So David, if you have a thought on that, feel free to share what kind of, like, if you want to drill down more, maybe we could opine, or at least Patrick could opine. Tony and I's opinion might be moot to you. So I've stalled enough. So now I know what I want to go ahead and run with. I am going to do another brand that I actually have never owned, but I think Patrick would like to talk about. Zen. and you know what? I'll make the poll and try and talk at the same time. So I'm actually going to put Zen at good. Most of their design language does not appeal to me. So again, kind of like Christopher Ward, I don't really see myself ever owning Zen. However, their robustness has always been highly praised, and they seem to take a lot of risks, particularly with dial configuration, dial aesthetic. So while the risks they take go in a direction that does not resonate with me, and I see Patrick, we could have blown that up. Show off your Zen. Let me get that zoomed in for everyone here. There we go. See, to me, that's like a Lego blockiness. Just I can't imagine myself wearing it, but that they're willing to do it, I think deserves some kudos. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and say Zen is a solid 3. They're a good brand. Patrick, you own them. You have actual hands-on experience.
Yeah, but I'm also an honest person, so you know, there's no part of me that thinks that Zen can be a 4, but they are the strongest of 3. And
Okay.
that's only just because I just think their technologies are so cool. I mean, I agree with you. Their watches, they've got a very simple aesthetic, but you know, they've got humidity sensors in their watches, they've got argon gas in their watches, they've got tegmented submarine steel cases. They're doing a lot to make a normal watch cooler. And for example, like this one here, this is the U50 Pro. So they only made a handful of them. They were available for about 2 hours, and I was lucky enough to get in there. But you know, they changed the dial around a little bit. They put a domed crystal on it. They just did a couple tweaks to make it unique and cool. And of course, unique and cool is what I love more than anything. So, you know, I jumped on it ASAP. But I just think that sort of brand that looks for things to make a normal watch cool, like if Rolex did that, if they used different metals and they added something that, you know, an actual diver wanted on a watch and they listened to people, they would get far more respect than just being the brand that dishes out, you know, a new color or a new backwards date, and everyone just goes, oh. So
Do you think that was why there was so much hype when they finally made a titanium watch?
I guess you can buy a $150 titanium watch on Amazon.com right now if you want.
But they named their metal what, like Yachanium or something. They always have to give it a weird Rolex name.
Yeah, put a 15 grand price tag on it, a 3 or 4 grand premium over the regular. So I know it's you know, we're not into watches because they make sense. We're in them because we like them, because there's nothing that makes sense about these prices. But as I said, Zen, as I said, they just get respect for doing cool things with relatively simple designs. Solid 3.
All right. Another 3. Tony.
I have limited experience. I've never seen one or tried one on in person. But I do understand where Patrick's coming from. They do have some cool things that they've done. And I, like Patrick, some of that blocky minimalist type design stuff I like a lot, which you can tell. I mean, I own multiple field watches. Field watches are kind of my jam. So watches that fall into that aesthetic, I like. Overall, I feel bad saying anything because of how little experience I have, but I've seen them recommended to me often enough that I think I will also go with a 3.
All right. Straight 3s from the panel. So what does the live audience think? And they think 50% 3 as well. And that was the majority, well, plurality, I guess, technically. So, all right, we have another good. Zen, you did it. We're proud of you, Zen. Patrick, I'll let you pick another brand.
Man, I'm looking at that Soul Timex at the bottom, and I'm trying to think of who I can make join the list.
You see, unfortunately, what I might do is download this, and then I'll do some point a round 2 with a bunch of other, because I shed a lot of brands. I mean, one of the initial things I pulled, I mean, we could have had MVMT, we could have had Danielle Wellington. I had reasons for not including them in the first
Well,
go.
even though my blind eyes can't see it, what's the blue one? I'll take the blue one.
The blue one is Longines.
Ah, okay, that's a great choice. So I just went to an event recently at a local little authorized dealer that had a little get together, and I got to finally put my hands on some Longines because I just never have. And I I can't say I was pleasantly surprised, but I wasn't like turned off by the brand either. So now that I have a little bit of experience, I can say they're pretty nice, normal watches that don't excite me, which almost sounds like a bad thing, but I'm going to give them a 2.
Okay. All right. A 2 from Patrick. Tony, your thoughts?
I've had a little bit of experience with them. We have a dealer locally that I've been to a time or two. It is one of those that I think has some interesting things, but for the most part, like Patrick said, they're very inoffensive. They're very run of the mill. I don't think there's anything that sends them out very far from anybody else. I would rank them also as a 2.
Okay. Yeah. We'll all three-peat it to a 2. I like a lot of their dial designs. Actually, their aesthetic that they do for a lot of their watches really appeals to me. Way too thick, though. Swatch is like giving them the short end of the stick on the movement side of things. I mean, coming out with a GMT that's 17 millimeters thick is just ridiculous in this day and age, especially at the price point that they ask for Longines, because it's significantly more than Tissot. So for that reason, yeah, it's okay. But there's a lot of competition at that price point, so it's tough for them, and I don't think they stand out well. And in terms of the audience, they actually came in at a tie between okay and good, both with 37% of the vote, which would be a 2.5, which means, of course, that it is going to be okay. So Longines ends up as okay. And Mr. Tony, you may take us away on your pick.
Since we just did Longines, let's go with Oris.
All right, Oris, thoughts?
I consider Oris to be, in its price point, probably my favorite collection between their Pro Pilots, their Big Crowns, and their Aquases. They all they've done interesting designs. They do interesting color variations. They all have their own little special things about them that really make them stand out. And starting with having their own in-house movements, like Dennis mentioned earlier, on their in-house movements, they're putting huge, great warranties on them. And I feel like they're in a very good place for what they are. And they're very much at the top of their market area in quality. So I'm going to put them as a 3.
Okay, 3 for Tony. Patrick, thoughts on Oris?
Oris was in so much trouble either this year or late last year. They almost got themselves a 2. But everything Tony said is spot on. They make a great watch. Their 400 series movement is just great. You know, I have to say they don't excite me. I don't see myself ever owning an Oris because I don't think they make anything that just makes me go wow. But I know their quality, and I think the passion behind the brand is there, so it gives me credit. They came so close to a 2 rating because of the release of the Kermit.
Oh, the Kermit.
It was the wrong collaboration. Please show me on the watch where the collaboration touched you.
Yeah, I mean, you give me a Kermit face date on my date wheel, and I'm giving you a solid wannabe 2. But the rest was so strong, they saved themselves. They're still a 3.
Yeah, I liked the Kermit. So, but that aside, anyway, because I'm a child and easily amused. There are 3 for me also. I probably would have put them at a 2 a few years ago, but as Patrick noted, the 400 movement I think they've really shown a desire to up their game, and I think they're an interesting independent watch brand, and yeah, they lean into the same like 3 core designs an awful lot, but those are pretty popular. And I actually think they appeal to different segments. Like the Pointer big dates look very, very different than the Aquas line, and then you've got like the Pro Pilots and stuff, and what they're doing with the new movement's very impressive. So and I do own an Oris. I own one of the more boring Pro Pilots without Kermit on it. But yeah, so a few years ago, I'd have been an okay on them, but I do think they're a good at this point. Though interesting, I do think, I wonder if that's going to put them in the same boat as Christopher Ward, because as they stick that new movement in more and more watches, the price points are going up. And this was a brand that had a lot of watches under 2,000. So, and that's not where they retail these 400 movement watches. So it'll be interesting to see if that results in some. I don't know if they're going to have the same tension that Christopher Ward does, because I don't think Oris was so much seen as budget as they were seen as independent, but we'll see. But anyway, a 3 from me as well. So the audience looks like they are in concurrence. They went 45% as a 3. Good. So, all right, another good old Oris. All right. What I'm going to go ahead and do at this point is we only have a few left, so I'll just start going down the list again instead of us picking them. Breitling is the next one for us to do. So, Patrick, do you have thoughts on Breitling?
Well, it's simple for me. They make good watches. I just don't like them very much because I'm not a chronograph guy. And pretty much everything Breitling makes that's cool is a chronograph. So I have to take kind of my little bit of a bias out of there and just say, like, I know it's a good watch relative to the other brands. They're better priced. So I got to give them a 3.
Okay, 3 from Patrick. Tony.
I think that is overall a very fair rating for Breitling. I think it's one of those places that, or one of those pieces that has huge fans, and don't do anything overly offensive. I think they're in a spot where they do very well for themselves. I think they're a decently well known brand, and I'm going to put them as a 3.
Yes. Okay. Another 3. And I'm going to do a 3 as well. There are some that I like. I think Breitling executes a busy dial better than pretty much anyone else. And I don't normally care much for busy dials. I just think they would have been an okay, like 7 or 8 years ago, but with the new direction the company's been in, I think they found their footing again. They still do an awful lot of the old, and Tudor does this too. So I'm not, it's not just Breitling, but they do an awful lot of the let's call it the Breitling caliber, whatever. And it's some standard ETA. They do that in a lot of their watches. Their chronographs are really where it's at. And that's their chronograph overall structure. Like, I prefer Zenith to their technology, but they do have impressive technology. So it's a good watch. There are a couple of model lines that I like, but it's not a brand I personally look much into. A lot of the public really identifies with Breitling, though. It's one of those brands that actually can be said in the same breath. It's not going to be it's not going to be before Rolex, but it's one of those where people will say Breitling and Tag are brands people know. And that might be more because of all the saturation they did back in the big blingy watch era. But at this point, I think they've done a really good job about refining their collection, giving each model line its own identity again, and not making them all super massive. So, yeah, I think they have a good product at this stage. So I'm going to go ahead and 3 them as well. And what will the crowd say? The crowd says yes. Oh, the crowd ties it okay and good. So 2.5, but that still averages out as a good. Okay, so now it's Gerard Perregaux. Patrick. Have you ever owned a Gerard Perregaux? Let me open one.
I own a very special Gerard Perregaux.
Ah.
So I am one of the exclusive, maybe lucky, maybe not lucky, depends on how much there's hate for it. But I have the Bamford edition ceramic Gerard Perregaux. So there's only 45 of them on the planet, and I am one of those 45. But oh man, I've got a pet peeve with that watch. I It's a beautiful watch and the movement's great, but I don't know if it's the ceramic, I don't know if it's the movement and whatever hairspring, but I had to buy a $300 demagnifier from Europe to allow myself to wear this watch regularly because every time I wear it, I magnetize it. I've never magnetized any other watch I've ever owned. So, as I said, it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine with the GP, but all in all, I think GP makes a great watch. They make movements for other companies too. One of my favorite Cartiers actually has a GP movement in it. It's just a good brand. They're not a 4, they're not a 2, they're a 3.
Okay. A 3 from Patrick. Tony, GP.
I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to say they are a 2. They're okay. I don't know a whole lot about them. I know that a lot of their line looks like it wants to be a Royal Oak.
The Laureato is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, and that alone is off-putting. But they also have a lot of watches that just are really busy and does not fall into my own personal like. On Prestige, I hear them mentioned here and there, but not. And well, like Obi's just said, is you hear them, and every time I hear about them, I hear they're underrated, but I just don't ever see anything that argues why they should be higher than a 2.
Interesting. And I did highlight this before, but I'll call out Captain Blimp here mentioned this was the error in the Orient I was talking about. I think I said minute markers. It was the second markers. There's a gap in them. If you ever look up some images of the Mako, I didn't remember what model it was. Oh, it's really obvious too. You do not need a loop to see it. All right, back to GP. So Patrick's a 3, Tony's a 2. This is tough for me. So again, kind of like how Patrick's tried to set aside his biases in certain on certain brands, I have to as well because Ken already pointed out my issue. I remember GP for one reason. Timepiece Gentleman tried to make it a thing, and I'm like, no, we are not just making it a thing because you need to sell watches. And so whenever I hear GP, I actually almost never even look at their watch lines. I have decided against them so much. Like when they broke away from Kering Group, I was just like, I'll look at Ulysse Nardin. I won't look at GP. Because the other issue was, I know I took a lot of downvotes for it. I have, I won't say dunked, but I've criticized Laureatos and their Royal Oak wannabe-ness quite extensively. But that is not the only thing that GP makes. That said, I don't know if they're really underrated or if they're properly rated and they're just an okay brand. So I think we're going to go back to the old ways of saying things like with Vacheron. I'm going to say they're probably upper end okay, but I'm going to round them down to a 2. So I think they need to find some footing, and that's not just like doing green on green on green Laureatos. They need to do something other than Laureato, and they need to get attention on it. And they probably have the chops to do it and come out with a really good product. And maybe the product they come out with is a solid product, but I don't know. To me, it's too, I don't know what their brand identity is supposed to be. To me, it feels like they're wanting to take sort of kind of like what some people have criticized Chopard with the Alpine Eagles. Like it just feels a little too much like you're trying to take from more prestigious brands and not twist it enough. But whereas I think Chopard did change it enough, I'm not sure it's Chopard or Chopard. So sorry, I'll say it 5 different ways. But I'm not sure GP has done it. I think it's too derivative. But I'll go ahead and give it a 2. I probably should give it a 3, but I'm not. It's late. I'm being mean.
Come on, crowd. Come on, crowd.
Come on, people. They agree. 62% say it's a 2. It's okay.
Oh.
What happened? Patrick, you've been winning the crowd by and large, really ever since like the first 3 brands. So I'll take this as a win for the community. What might not be a win for the community is going to be the next brand, Bulgari. I'll go ahead and try and talk and type again because I feel bad always making Patrick start. So Bulgari, this was tough for me too because again, I don't want my biases to overly infect it, so I'll just declare it so everyone knows where they're at. I always look at these because I hear about like their thin watches, the Octafinissimos that are the thin version, and I think that's really really cool. And then I look, but I think all of their watches are really ugly and all kind of look the same. And I know they've done some stuff where like, they had the rights to doing the Gerald Genta brand and the Gerald Charles. And so they've got watches in that vein with like the jump hours. And those are kind of cool, but they just seem a little too jewelry-fied because Bulgari is a jewelry brand. So I don't know. They just don't seem to have the same spirit like when those were like branded as Genta watches by the Genta company and stuff. So I look repeatedly because they do have some interesting shapes and they are their own thing. So I think that's really cool. But I don't know if other than getting a watch really thin, is that enough? Because I mean, Piaget does thin watches, and there are lots of brands that even Ming now has a weird, overly priced, but a weird, Gorilla Glass thin watch. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to GP them. I'm going to give them a 2. They're probably a 3, and I'm being overly harsh, but everything everyone talks about is the Octafinissimo. The reason I'm going to end up pulling it down is the one thing I've always heard with people buying the thin ones is you need to try them on because apparently they wear really weird. And a lot of people say they are not comfortable or they don't fit right. And all the specs look, you look at the lug to lug and the diameter, and you think it's going to be perfectly in your wheelhouse of sizing. And for whatever reason, if your wrist isn't flat enough or whatever, it just doesn't work. And since the thin thing's like the only cool thing they've got going on, I'll use that as my crutch to limp over the finish line at a 2. Patrick, am I wrong?
Not so wrong, but I'm going to give them a little bit more benefit of the doubt just for 2 things. One, they made the first thin watch that was kind of recognized as being cool. Piaget I know has been doing it for a while, but no one cared. What I really loved about Bulgari is they came back and they made it 100 meters water resistant because they called it a sports watch. And then they said, wait a minute, it's not a sports watch. I can't even wash my hands. And that's my biggest pet peeve about even our good friends Royal Oaks out there. They're 50 meters water resistant. That's garbage. And I have to give them respect for listening to people to make a change that to me would make a watch that I wouldn't buy into a watch that I would buy. However, I have to give some negatives. It wears like a dinner plate on my wrist. So I don't think it's the prettiest watch. I think their movement is beautiful. I think their design of the movement is beautiful. I love that they use some weird complications. They made a tantalum watch for only watch. They made a retrograde and the Genta styles. They've got cool points, but they've got a lot of anchors. So they are a very low 3.
Okay. So we weren't too far apart. Tony, where are you at in the world of Bulgari?
Oh, I'm much farther apart. Everything I've seen about them, and again, I've never been hands-on with them at all, and they don't have anything I've seen that really interests me. And it does crack me up that they have a watch that's almost $5,000 that's an aluminum case with a rubber strap and a rubber stuff all over it that seems to be special, but they feel like a very expensive fashion watch to me. Everything they do feels like somebody went, hey, this is something that I could get from one of the really low end groups, but we're going to do it in an expensive manner. And so I'm going to rank them as a 1.
A 1? Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Gosh, I thought Patrick was the mean one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does the watch not look enough like a snake for you? Is that what you need?
Well,
you need your Cobra watch on your wrist to really make it stand out and special.
But I mean, what can I say? But the audience, 55% agreed with Tony and say it's a 1. So that averages out to a 1.75. So Bulgari gets in at an okay, but it's a close thing. Oh,
look at some of their watches. I feel like
Wow.
if you were wearing some of their watches that you need every time you ran into a room, you'd have to go Cobra.
Okay. The next brand. Since you're warmed up, Tony, I'll let you start with it as Glashuta Original.
I'm going to put them in what I would consider the most standard of ranks. I'm going to put them in a 2. There's nothing about them that's super special to me. There's nothing about them that really jumps out off of the top of my head for them. They are very much what if this was a 5-point tier, they would be ranked a 3 for me. They're inoffensive with some nice stuff and some stuff that just doesn't matter.
Okay. So a 2 for Geo from Tony. Patrick, thoughts on Glashuta?
My answers are going to be getting shorter and shorter now that we're at the 2-hour mark. But I'm going to say,
yes, and I apologize. I was afraid that we spent too long reminiscing on Breitling.
I'm going to say exactly what Tony said. They're so boring. I want to give them a 1, but I know that they're well made, so I have to give them a 2.
Okay. I will give them a 3. The panel line is the only line anyone cares about, but I'm knocking them up a level because their finishing on most of their watches is pretty good, and their actual number of man hours versus their retail price is probably the best bang for your buck in the industry. So for those reasons, I'll go ahead and give them a 3. But yeah, you're right. A lot of their watches are going to be seen as pretty boring. And the public is coming in at, I believe, a 3 as well, if it updates. So let me do the math. Yes, 66%. So that means 2.5. So Geo ends up at a 3. Patrick, I'll let you go next. IWC.
I mean, IWC is kind of a tough one for me. I mean, I think the Ingenieur is a very nice, normal watch. I don't think it's anything special. I think they completely dropped the ball on the new release, not just because of the price, just because they didn't add any new engineering to it. So they could have made it so much cooler. So I'm kind of disappointed at them. The rest of their watches are just a little bit ho-hum. So I really want to give them a 2, but once again, I think they're a decent watch brand, so I gotta go a little above the line, and I'll give them a 3.
All right, 3 from Patrick. Tony, IWC.
IWC has some things that I really like. I like their pilot watch. I like their the Portuguesers. Some of them I like a lot actually, and for those variety of reasons and the overall good stuff I've heard on the quality. But I'm going to put them as a 3.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and do a 2. And I even owned a Portugueser. Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. Here's the problem with IWC. Like, everything's big. So there's probably not true, but I'm just going to say it for time reasons. We're just going to say everything's big. That's fine. It is what it is. Yeah, they're okay. And the audience is split 50-50 between good and okay, which means that's a 2.5. So it's going to come out as a good. So yay for that. All right, Moser. Tony, I'll let you start.
I have zero experience with Moser. I know you've got, I know you recently got one, but I've never even really looked at them that deeply. I will just, based upon what little bit I've heard online about them, I will put them at a 2.
All right,
A 2. Oof.
2 from Tony for
Shots
Moser.
fired.
All right, Patrick, what do you think?
I know. I'm hanging up my mean hat. I'm the nice guy in the room, but
how mean is it when it's like I'm going to put them at okay because I've heard some stuff, but not a lot. I'm not an expert. I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt. I wouldn't call that shots fired.
I'm going to give a rare nicety in my world to Moser because similar to what I said about another brand, and I don't remember which one it was, I love how much the owner and the management of the brand loves the brand. And I think you see that in the watches that they make. And I think they make really interesting watches, whether it be Vanta Black or whether it be, their attempt at a integrated sports watch, even though, they just copied the party. But I think they make a really nice watch. They're a little pricey, but they make a really nice watch. And their motto is truly rare, and they are. And that's kind of cool. So I have to give them a 4.
All right. Patrick's a 4. Tony's a 2. I'm a 3. Yes, they don't make a lot of watches. I do like that they take a lot of chances. However, they also do, because they take chances, they do dumb things like
really dumb
Bitcoin,
things.
like Bitcoin watches and just stupid crap like that. But here's another reason why I'll knock them down from great down to good. The movements are too big. And they are trying to solve that. And they did just come out with a new streamliner with a smaller movement. They got it down to 39 millimeter. However, they skew way big ever since, especially in the new era. So I think it's on the cusp there of being a truly great company. And in some ways, I do think they are great. I do like their watches. I do have one on today, but I'm going to put them at good for a few reasons. They just haven't broken through. The audience agrees with me and says it's a good. So that evens out exactly at a 3. So another good for us. That was 55% good from the audience. Patrick, Zenith.
I'm going to give a boring answer of a 3 for Zenith because they make really good watches. They just don't make watches that stand out. They made one and it went away. And if anyone wants to go down a rabbit hole of interesting homework, look up the Zenith Inventor. They made a watch that had a complete silicone everything. It was like an oscillating bowl of jello, and that's what ran the watch. But then it just disappeared. So they sold them. But I think they got all sent in for factory service, and they must have secretly, allegedly, paid the people and said, here's your money, you're not getting a watch back, because there are none left on the planet. And it was really cool that they did it. And I wish they'd do more of that, because then I'd like the brand more. But right now, they're really nice, but boring chronographs, and I don't really like chronographs. So 3.
All right. That makes sense to me. I'm actually going to go ahead and put them at a 3 also. I do like their chronographs. What I like about Zenith is they do 5 hertz movements, which makes a lot of sense with chronographs because of the 10th of a second accuracy. And not very many people bother with 5 hertz movements anymore. Grand Seiko's probably the only other brand that is in a noteworthy category that does it, but they also do it in watches where it doesn't matter. At least Zenith does, but they lean heavy on their vintage line. And if you're not talking El Primero, I mean, the Defy line, I do think they're pushing the edge a little bit there. But I also think most of the Defy line doesn't click with most people. But they make a good, solid watch, and I think with their Chronomaster Sport, they've won back enough popularity with the public that they move out of okay back into good. Yes, because it looks a lot like a Daytona. But hey, whatever it takes, I guess. Tony, what do you think of Zenith?
I'm also going to put them as a 3. I'm going to put them at good. I do think they've done some interesting things in their Defy line. I think they've got a few other watches that really jump out at me. But I've heard pretty much nothing but solid stuff about them. Again, I have very limited hands-on experience with them, but I like them. 3.
All right. And the audience at 66% agreed with all of us. 3 it is. All right. Tony, Omega.
I mean, you kind of have to put them up way at the top, up at 4. No, they're 3. I can't put them up at 4. They do too many. They have too many SKUs. They have too much stuff that is, we made one minor tweak, so we're going to do an entirely new little line design thing. They've got too many watches that are just not what you would expect from a group like that. For every moon watch, every watch that is just beautiful, they've got 75 variants of it, most of which are crap. So
okay,
I'm going to put them at 3.
A lot of crap. 3. Pretty nice.
Well, actually, I mean,
that's pretty generous.
It's not bad quality. It's hey, we're doing an entirely new SKU for what amounts to we changed a screw, or
Okay.
we made a minor adjustment. I think they definitely need to have a lot tighter collection overall before they get to something higher than a 3.
All right, Patrick, what do you think of Omega?
My quick answer is I think they make the nicest, best movements for their price point, but none of their watches are interesting enough that makes me excited, except for maybe the Flow Prof, just because it's so weird, but it's almost a little too weird. So I think they're great, but I can't go higher than a 3.
All right. I'm a 3 as well. Actually, Robert in the chat summarized it really well. They've had this coaxial movement out for over a decade at this point. There's no excuse that not a single watch, at least not a single men's watch that they make, is under 10 millimeters thick, even in the DeVille line. Absolutely ridiculous. If they were a good company, they'd have figured that out. If they were a great company, they'd have figured that out by now. They have not, so they're a good company. They're pushing their price point up too much to compete with Rolex, but you're right. Spec-wise, they're an excellent watch. Very well machine finished movements. There's a lot to like about Omega, but they're not great. And the audience agrees as well that they are a 3 at 60% of the vote. So good for Omega. Oh, we got double tier line here now. All right. Patrick, Piaget, you mentioned them earlier.
Sorry, forgot I was mic'd. I'm just going to have to give them a simple, irrelevant 2. They're not a bad watch, but who cares? Piaget, I forget they exist if you were to ask me about them any other time of the day. 2.
All right, a 2 for Patrick. Tony, Piaget.
I think it falls into the same because I literally had to look them up to even recognize a single watch from the collection. So yeah, they're a 2. They're an I exist.
Yes. You know what? I have to agree. I have looked a bit at Piaget's. Here's the thing. A lot of the Piaget's that are interesting are small. They're ladies' watches. They're designed that way. That's who their target was. And their big integrated sports watch that they came out with, the Polo S, looks like a Nautilus, but lesser in every single way. But it's still that same shape that I might actually like some of the aspects a little bit more, but like finishing wise and everything else, you see definitely where they save the money. So overall, I think they can do it. I think they've got the technology. But for now, I would say for most people, it's just going to be an okay brand. And the live audience is in agreement at 66% of the vote. So those are all solid 2s. So Piaget, double tiers are okay. Tony, Tag Heuer.
2. I mean, it's a solid 2. I know a lot of people really like the Monacos, but there's nothing in them that really in any of their lines that really jumps out at me, and it kind of irks me that they do have a line of watches that are $3,000 quartz watches.
Yes, the Formula Ones. All right, so 2 from Tony. Patrick, thoughts on Tag?
I have to give them a 2 as well, just because, yeah, they're fine. They're entry level luxury, and they really just are. I mean, I hate that word. It's just almost kind of demeaning to it because it's still a very expensive, nice watch, but they're just for the same price. You could buy something else from another brand, and I think I would enjoy it more. So they're a 2.
Yep, I agree for all the reasons you said. I see no reason to waste any more time. I'll be a 2 as well. And the audience is actually going to score them at a tie between poor and good. So that's a 2. That's a 2 also. So we end up putting it there. Patrick, Cartier.
Oh man, I'm going to get in trouble for this one. Finally, I get to be my mean self again. I think Cartier just makes a big pile of garbage, and I think you are paying so much more for absolute junk. And I asked a guy that at that little event I just went to, and he pretty much said the next watch he wanted was a Santos, and I just looked at him straight eyed and just said, "Why?" And for $8,000, there is so much cooler you can buy than a relatively cheaply made watch that no one cared about 3 years ago until all of a sudden influencers, not this guy, told you how cool it was. And then all of a sudden now people are buying them. You know, that they've been around forever. They didn't change anything, so there's nothing new about it. It's like the Daytona. When it was a dog 20 years ago, it means it's still a dog today. It's just as boring as it was then, except now money and influences push people to like it, and that's not the way I roll. So as I said, I am not a fan of the brand in general. There's a couple old vintage watches. I think they made really cool ones, but their modern lineup I find completely boring and beyond normal. So vintage Cartier, maybe a three. Current Cartier, I mean, it's not garbage, so I can't give it a one, but it's a solid two, a low two.
Okay.
The way you started, I was expecting a 1.
I know, but I have to be fair.
But he's fair. He's fair. Patrick's fair. I'm going to give him a 3. Yes, pricing wise, definitely an issue. But again, that's what the used market is for. I think the thing that I like about Cartier that I think goes ahead and elevates them, besides the fact that they have, moved into the number 2 in Swiss sales at this point, so they definitely have popularity. And again, I'm trying to not just think of it from my perspective, is that they do take chances with very avant-garde design stuff. It doesn't always resonate with me, but hey, for every person that thinks the Tank and the Santos is boring, there's the Roadster and there's the Crash, and they've just got they do some unique looks. They don't all just look like a serpent. So I'll go ahead and put them at a 3. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I was going to put them at a 3 as well, just because of the how do I want to put it? They've got some stuff that is interesting. They do some stuff that is fairly popular, and quite frankly, they do some things that you don't see a lot of anybody else doing. Because of it's the more kind of throwback, old school style looks. So I'll give them a 3, but I will say I don't think I would ever own one. I think at that price point, there's a lot of other watches I would get.
Okay. And the audience was split between good and okay. So it was a tie between those two. So they averaged out. So anyway, it moves up into good because of that reason. And so Tudor, the last one. Tony, I'll let you start.
I like Tudors. I really do. I think they are at a price point where their problems, they tend to have very thick watches. They tend to have a few other issues. And I think their price point makes them okay at that range. They're definitely not going to be a 4. I don't know if I could even put them as a 3. This is really hard decision wise. I think I would put them as a low 3, high 2. I think they have watches that I personally love, but aren't necessarily huge. And a lot of their stuff I feel is overly influenced by being the little Rolex baby brother. Because I feel like there's too many spots where they're being the people want the older vintage Rolexes, so they use some of that stuff to make a Tudor design while Rolex keeps rolling forward with where it is.
So where are you scoring it? Low 3 or high 2?
Low 3. I'll go with low 3.
A 3. Okay. I'll give them a 3 as well. Going with their in-house movement, which is pretty robust. I think they deserve credit for that. Yes, they make a lot of derivative black bays. No, they don't decorate their movements. If Omega was still at the same price, I would say Omega's the better buy. But now that Omega is driving their prices up so much, Tudor's almost got this price segment to themselves at this point for sports watches that are kind of coming in that $3,000 to $5,000 range. And I think they make a pretty good product for that space. Yeah, they do have a few challenges. So no, they're not great. But unlike Rolex, they do get to experiment with materials and stuff. So that's where the Wilsdorf Foundation lets the experimentation happen. So for those reasons, I'll go ahead and put them in at a good as well. So, but I think a more robust good than yours, Tony. But a 3 is a 3. Patrick, the people love you, so you get the last word.
Oh, well, tutor. I'm the owner of 2 tutors, and I have to give them massive credit for all the things that Tony said about them, throwing out some interesting stuff. And then he also threw in the same argument was they're kind of the Rolex baby brother, and they are. I mean, they're copying some dive watch vibes, so they lose a little bit there. But the fact that they make a silver watch, a gold watch, a bronze watch, now a carbon fiber watch, and they may not be fully in-house, but I don't care about that. It's still a nice movement, and their quality controls in it. I have to give them. They're a very high 3 to maybe a low 4, and in the interest of them just being the experimental brand, which I like that aspect of them, I'm going to give them that little bit of a nudge. I'm going to give them the low 4 that they deserve.
All right, low 4 out of them. And so we'll see what the public says. 50% agree with Patrick, a 4, which means when we divide it out, it's a 3.5. So it does actually get up into that 4 category, Patrick. All right, we did it. We're done. And we only ran 20 minutes long, so I do apologize for that. I'm glad we only went with 3 panelists in the end, but we did wax awfully poetic when it came to some of the models, so went over on 1 minute each. But any closing plugs you guys want to do? I don't have any.
Not really. I mean, hey, I have to go edit my video for tomorrow morning because I am a procrastinator and I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to be up for a couple hours finishing that. I release a new video every morning at 8, and 8 is not that far away.
That's true.
That's
So
what
we're
I'm
gonna
do.
we're gonna let you get out of here, Patrick. Link to his channel is below. If you definitely check it out and subscribe to it, you can hear more hard takes or demands, Patrick, for you to do your own ranking. They just want your rankings. They don't want the corruption of me or Tony, much less the audience. So so consider that if you ever need a video topic.
Okay.
Tony, anything out of
I've
you?
got nothing to plug. I'm gonna go to bed.
All right. Well, I got a live stream at 10 a.m. tomorrow because I've learned I have to be consistent, and Saturday morning's the one time I'm consistent. So it'll be about pet peeves and what I hate about watches. So more toxicity to come, but only from me. So anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of your holidays.
Good night.